The third chapter, the Sunny Uplands. We began to discern subtleties in the world, the letter Hey. We made vital connections, the Vav. We learned the skill and necessity of struggle, the Zayin. The next three letters, the Chet, the Tet, and the Yud, are the letters of growing maturity between the ages of 20 and 30. Chet signals the entrance into a greater dimension. Tet is pure goodness, rarest and most precious of biblical qualities, and spirituality develops in earnest, the Yud. Now you may recall that we approached this chapter with a growing realization of our potential, and that whilst we had to learn to toe the line in this world, we also had to learn that we were somebody and we had to stand up for ourselves, the torch of the Zayin. This chapter commences with the letter Chet, the letter that contains the energy for new beginnings. It is the 8th letter in the alphabet, and the 8th day is the beginning of a new week, and the 8th musical note is the beginning of a new scale. You see, the letter Chet has the power and the genius for new beginnings. Our beginnings seem a long time ago when we reach this chapter, as we emerge from our youth and enter into the stronger letters. We leave behind the comfortable lowlands of our adolescence, and with a fresh wind in our face, we see, as it were, the blue mountains beckon us. The road opens up before us. This is an exciting time. The Chet is an exciting letter, full of the power, the energy for new beginnings. But this time, it's with an energy that springs almost solely from within us, not imposed upon us from without by parents and loved ones. It's an artesian well of energy springing up, the result of years of input from those who have loved us and contributed to our growing, built our confidence and our sense of security. We are full of hope, full of expectation, always ready to try new things. We've made our connections, we've learned to stand up and contend. We feel as though we may be able to achieve great things. Some of us may even feel destined for greatness, as silly as that may sound. You see, the Chet is heady, and whilst in later life we might smile with embarrassment at our earliest naivety and self-belief, we mustn't be too hard on ourselves, because the hopeful Chet is God's gift. The zest for life is God's renewed gift to each generation. Now, the more completely that we've been paying attention, the sooner do we arrive at the sweetness of the Tet. The Tet truly is sunny uplands, a level grassland where the weather is never inclement. The Tet, you see, is goodness. The Hebrew word for good, tov, begins with the letter Tet. We can probably begin to say that we've grown up when we've reached the Tet, for goodness is essentially for others. A baby never thinks of others. It isn't unselfish and self-sacrificing. We wouldn't expect it to be. These life arts are learned as we mature, hopefully. Jesus, the perfect man, embodied this goodness, and it was always available for those in need. He showed us that a healthy life is one that is ever giving itself away. Think of an apple tree. It produces crisp, rosy apples, and any passerby can take one. The fruit is for others. And interestingly, if the apples are allowed to fall and rot every year, they turn the ground acidic and actually damage the tree. Fruit, you see, is for others. Thinking of others is mature, healthy, and godlike. When we meet such a person, we may say, that person is good. In this chapter, we reach a level in our lives where we discover that the satisfaction and fulfillment of helping others far outweighs serving ourselves. Jesus said that it is more blessed to give than to receive. Acts 20, verse 35. In another place he said, freely you have received, freely give. Matthew 10:5. And this generosity of spirit must become habitual. But before we arrive there, we have all sorts of setbacks. We know in our minds that unselfishness is good, but the old selfishness, the looking out for number one, keeps pulling us back. But even the world expects more from a 20-odd-year-old. And after repeated lessons, hurting others, being mean in word or action, we tire of ourselves, and we may say with the apostle, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Romans 7:24. But the point is this: we are now on God's side. We agree with him, and that's all he needs. God and our will is a majority against our innate selfishness. Goodness must not be underestimated. It was the word that God used to describe each successive stage of creation, culminating in, it is very good, tov ma'od. And where does simple, selfless goodness lead us? To spirituality, of course. And the next letter to be packed with spirituality is the Yud. In the Hay passage of our lives, we began to discern spirituality within the natural world, you remember. You may recall the shape of the hay. It's a dalet containing a Yud. However, here we have a Yud that stands perfectly alone. The perception of spirituality in this slightly later chapter of our lives is way more profound. Its credibility is no longer dependent upon the natural world as it was with the hay, the natural world containing the spirituality. No, now the spiritual aspect stands alone. It stands on its own, even overshadowing the natural world. The thinking person realizes that there is a temporariness about the things he can see, and an eternality about the things he can't see. It was the lack of this that caused Esau to despise his birthright, preferring instead a bowl of stew. Whereas before we may have referred to the natural world as the real world, implying that the spiritual was less real, we now see that the spiritual world is in fact much more real than this one. We may begin to realize that in a sense, every object here is a representation of something there, that its identity there is the real essence of the thing, including ourselves. Nothing is as it seems. It's as though another world is opening up to us, and so it is. Remember where we began this chapter, the Chet, the 8th letter, the letter of new beginnings. There is more that isn't seen than what is seen in this world. The world is called olam in Hebrew, and this is also related to the word for hidden, alam. And what is hidden? God is hidden, and the real significance of things. And in this stage of our lives, we are not nearly so reliant upon seeing miracles in the natural world. Our faith has reached that spiritual level where we know. We don't just believe, we know. And it's very exciting. We stand at the threshold of a new world, a new old one, because remember, we were born with the knowledge of these things sealed in our hearts. God placed eternity in our hearts. In the Yud passage of our lives, we realize something that deep down we've known all along, that there is another world, a world in which sounds are being made, of which this world is merely an echo. Colours are emanating, and this world is but a reflection. We see in a glass darkly, but then face to face, said Paul. Now the next chapter describes the life truly maturing and attaining something of a summit, though not the final one.